Hello, hello, my fellow geeks. This is the Indian AvGeek episode number 75, and my name is Vishal Mehra. Welcome to a very special episode, the one that broke our own schedule to exist. Episode 75 was supposed to belong to Kareem Makhlouf, but now his episode becomes number 76 because Indian Aviation had itself a week. In the space of about 48 hours, give and take, Air India named Tewolde the man who turned Ethiopian Airlines into Africa's most profitable carrier, as its new CEO. IndiGo brought in Willie Walsh, fresh off running IATA, right as the airline turns 20. And while all that leadership news broke, IndiGo pulled its 787s, the leased 787s, out of long haul, just as Air India threw its own new wide bodies at Toronto. Two airlines, two new global heavyweight CEOs, two opposite long haul strategies. That's not a slow news week. So I've pulled in two friends of the show for a special out of turn episode. Sean Mendis, who watched Tewolde build Ethiopian from close quarters, and Ameya Joshi, who runs NetworkThoughts and reads Indian aviation strategy better than almost anyone I know. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. So happy that both of you could be here.
Wonderful to be here as always.
All right, let's start with the first question then. And this is about both Willie Walsh and Tewolde. Willie Walsh, as we know, has taken the wheel at IndiGo just a couple of days back. Tewolde steps into Air India's CEO position very soon. Does bringing in global heavyweights signal that Indian aviation has outgrown local playbooks and must now fight on global terms? What do you guys think?
I think, definitely. I don't think Indian aviation has ever been, well, I won't say ever, but has been local for the last 2 decades or so. I think, ever since we saw IndiGo come into the market and begin to be the fastest growing airline over the last 2 decades. I mean, they've gone from zero to multiple hundred aircraft in the world's 7th largest airline essentially in just 20 years. So that's been remarkable. That's a faster growth curve than Emirates has had. So, I mean, you can put that into perspective. So I don't think India has been, playing local for 2 decades. It's just that perhaps the globalized faces we saw were faces like Rakesh Gangwal and things who looked more local, even though they were global expertise already. So I think, just bringing in these big names now in like Tewolde and Willie Walsh, succeeding people like Campbell Wilson and Peter Elbers, who were pretty global names themselves as well. So this is just another step in the evolution. If you want to play global, you got to have global players. It's consider India to be the IPL now of the airline industry.
The Indian Plane League.
There we go.
Yeah. Ameya, your thoughts?
The Indian Plane League already holds one of the largest orders in the world, with IndiGo having the single largest order with Airbus. It also is the single largest airline, by the way, to take deliveries from Airbus. Nobody has taken more than 500 planes from Airbus. Lessors have, but a single airline, nobody. So that's where the Indian Plane League comes into picture. In fact, Willie Walsh and Tewolde, not the first time this is happening. If you look at the uncanny resemblance, Campbell Wilson, his appointment was announced in May 2022. Elbers had his appointment announced in May 22 as well. It was 4 days apart. Elbers joined in September. Campbell joined in July. Campbell's departure was announced towards the first week of April. Elbers left in March the same year. So you see, they had a very parallel entry and exit per se. Nobody expected both of them to go this quickly. So for whatever reasons they are, that's the case. And then that's happening again with Willie and Tewolde, because you have Willie announced end of March, early April, and joining August 3. And then Air India gets a new CEO announcement on August 5, which was very surprising. Now, impeccable record and And of course, more than me, who knows Africa better, so we'll hear it from him. But not too many uncanny similarities going on between the two airlines when it comes to the CEO part.
Indeed, indeed. Sean, you've watched Tewolde operate up close for years. I want to know from you what's a moment from inside Ethiopian that maybe the press releases about Africa's most profitable carrier never capture.
I've known Tewolde over 20 years now. When I first got to know him, he was head of marketing, and then he went up to become chief operations officer, then CEO, and then obviously now in his post Ethiopian Airlines career. And I think the main thing that really stands out about Tewolde is that he is very process driven. He's not someone who makes decisions without analyzing them. He's very good both, well, not both, but commercially, operationally, financially. He can just, you can see like the pieces moving in the 3D picture forming in his head. And that really gives him the ability to effectively manage an airline that is growing. And, he was part of what Ethiopian back in 2010 when they launched it was a 15-year plan they launched called Vision 2025. So he was part of the team under Ato Girma, who was the CEO back then, who put it all together for a 15-year plan for Ethiopian. The reality is then when he stepped in as CEO in 2011 to execute it, they achieved all the objectives within 11 years rather than the 15. And effectively, during his tenure there, they wound up quadrupling the fleet, quadrupling the route network, and quadrupling revenues and profits. So, when you're looking in terms of someone in the position that Air India is, that you need to effectively do the same thing, have a long-term strategy, but at the same time get short-term results. You've got someone who in a very similar challenging situation where there were politics, where there was a big order book, and he successfully managed it, both through internal resource allocation as well as going outside, for funding, for manpower, for whatever else as needed to be done. So if he can do half as well as he did at Ethiopian and just double the profits, I think Air India will have made one of the best moves they made in history.
Wow. All right. Ameya, while Air India was deciding on the ex-Ethiopian CEO to come to Delhi, IndiGo recently was welcoming a completely different kind of an outsider, right? From a regulator to an operator now. Of course, he was an operator before as well. Willie Walsh built IAG into a margin machine. We all know that. Really, really successful. And that impact you can even see now on the way IAG functions. He's built his entire career on legacy full service network carriers. If you look at IndiGo's playbook, most of the success, of course, has come from single fleet discipline and an LCC cost control. As IndiGo moves from that model into stretch, into XLRs, into 350s, maybe a year, 18 months down the line, can somebody like Willie Walsh lead a hybrid transition, you think, without destroying or affecting IndiGo's low cost DNA? Although, of course, well aware that he's known as slasher and used to, known to cut costs. But we won't say that for now. Tell me what you think.
Right. I think, yeah, with Willie, he's known to cut cost. He was always known to, be ruthless when it comes to cost, even if it comes at the cost of the people involved. And that's how his image was built over the years. With IndiGo, he has a different challenge. IndiGo has one of the lowest costs in the world already. So if you find something to cut, it will be one of the big achievements that he can find something to cut, and he may. So that's one part of the story. His challenge actually is premiumization. So by keeping the cost low, how can you give passengers the ability to feel premium and then pay premium because they're feeling that premium? And that's where the challenge comes. From a DNA perspective, I don't think a lot is changing at IndiGo, because as I keep saying, if there is competition, for IndiGo to take on competition is 2 out of 2,200 flights. That's nothing on the balance sheet. But to the competition to take on IndiGo, it's 100% of their network. So they've built themselves so large today that they have the ability to experiment, which I think is happening with Stretch. They have the ability to do some more experiments, which they tried with the wide body CMI operations, did not work. They are going back in October. So this is what a strong balance sheet gives. That it doesn't get you on the road directly, but gives you that buffer to try out. If it works, it does, and if there is a change in situation like we saw right now globally, it doesn't. And that is something which he will continue to have as a backup at Indigo, and give him that risk taking ability.
Right. Sean, I'll come back to you now. Ethiopian, we all know was in a way forced to build a fifth freedom transit hub out of Addis Ababa because of a small home market. When you think about Air India, you are sitting on probably one of the largest OND markets in the world, right? How much of you think the Tewolde's success was geography versus management discipline? And I know nobody has said it so far in so many words, but do you think the Ethiopian model is or might be a misleading label for what he inherits in Delhi?
First of all, I would just disagree with you a bit in terms of saying that Ethiopia is a small home market, because while Ethiopia, the country, might be, Ethiopian Airlines is not just the national airline of Ethiopia, it's effectively the national airline of Africa, because there are so many African markets where their primary, sitting here in Malawi, my primary link to the rest of the world is our daily flight on Ethiopian to Addis Ababa, from where I can connect to London, Delhi, Mumbai, Dubai, or wherever else I want to go through that. So as far as that goes, Ethiopia has transformed itself. And it's always been this way. It's just done it at a much larger scale now. And again, that scale up was largely done during Tewolde's time. And I think India is a very similar situation. And, we talk about how they've developed a sixth freedom. India doesn't necessarily have to develop it as a sixth freedom, but I think India is going to need to have to develop hubs rather than just the point-to-point model, which works fine for domestic traffic, but you're never going to be able to see things like, Hyderabad to Stockholm or Coimbatore to Athens happening other than in extreme niches. You may see markets like London, you may see European hubs being fed by that, partnerships and things. But for the most part, a market like India will be more like a market like the United States, where the market will be dominated primarily by major hub airports. And we're already seeing that happening in Delhi. We probably will see that happening in Mumbai. Which of the two airports will develop that way, we shall see. We're seeing that happening in Bengaluru. We're seeing that to a smaller extent in Hyderabad. These things are inevitable. It is a proven fact that the hub and spoke network model is the way to grow, especially if you're trying to grow out of an existing smaller market. So, when you've got a densified market like India, you can do point to point. Similar to what, say, Ryanair or EasyJet are doing in Europe, where they've got multiple bases and fly point to point, is similar to what IndiGo is doing. But when you start looking at long haul, when you start looking at longer and thinner routes, the only way that you can get the critical mass to make them work is to use a hub network model. And, that is the discipline needed to achieve that is something that Air India has largely lacked. Air India over the last few years has tried to be everything to everyone. They've not been clear as to whether they try to be premium or low cost or long haul or short haul or whatever else. And that's the discipline which I'm very confident they will do. He will be able to exploit value. So while Willie may be viewed as the slasher, and I completely agree that, if you can find something to slash in IndiGo, I, give the man the Nobel Prize for economics, because that is really going to be a discovery. But as far as Tewolde goes, I think you will see operational discipline and value addition to Air India's product be realized probably over the next 1 to 2 years as he prioritizes which of the different aspects of Air India's challenges he wants to address as the primary, secondary, and then onwards.
Fair point. Ameya, do you think operating those 6 damp leased 787s at ACMI rates, was it ever economically viable for IndiGo, or was it, just structurally below minimum efficient scale as far as IndiGo standards are concerned? Do you think stepping back now, the decision by IndiGo to wait for owned A350s to come in, maybe end of 2027, maybe beginning 2028, would that decision make IndiGo stronger?
I think yes, financially it makes them very strong right now by returning those ACMI. But we have to look at the process in detail. When did the first plane came? It came in February 2025. When was the deal announced? It was announced in October 2024. Which kind of deals take evaluation of about 6 odd months at the fastest speed. They started evaluating sometime in early 2024. Cost and 2024 versus what it is today is very different. Two things changed, and those two things are: one, the rupee depreciated much faster than the average of last 10 years. How do you calculate? You can only extrapolate, you cannot predict come what may. So the rupee depreciated much faster between 2024 to 26 than it did in the previous 10 years, if you're taking a 10-year average. The next thing that happened is, of course, the airspace closure. So 2024, Pakistan airspace was closure. There was no issues in West Asia, nothing. By the time the planes land, Pakistan airspace is not available. So you then decide to move from Delhi to Mumbai. Your entire analysis was based on the Delhi hub. So you've already taken the first hit. Then one after another, the hits come, which are geopolitical. Now, of course, in the analysis, maybe they would have found out that it's still a loss-making proposition, but not as much as it is making today. But that loss for their balance sheet is good enough to enter Europe, get an early mover advantage, and most importantly, start cornering slots and building partnerships. Because London Heathrow, you go today, tell them 6 seasons you're operating on a lease slot, on a temporary slot. Slot guidelines will give you a slot when you have your own planes coming in, and you continue with this, you can have, say, a double Delhi to London. With all the ambitions of everybody to go to London, in the end, what matters is the cash which you are burning. And if you're burning 3 hours more of cash on a ACMI operation, it's not going to work out. Call it luck. After they announced that these planes are going back, some sort of peace is returning to West Asia. So we don't know what will happen by October when the planes actually go back and if the cost has come down to where it was, but the decision is already taken. But that's how volatile aviation as an industry is.
Yeah. And, I'm going to add one thing on that, which is you've got to also keep in mind who their lessor is, which is Norse. And I said this to Vishal on WhatsApp as well yesterday, that there is a significant likelihood that Norse may not even be around by October. I mean, Norse's financial situation through their own public comments has been that they are effectively on the verge of collapsing. So I think this also may be a case of IndiGo pulling the plug before that decision was made for them. If they were to continue with this Norse thing for another year, as the original contractors had envisioned, there is a distinct possibility that they would have another meltdown of the order that they did last December, where you'd wind up with passengers stranded all over the world, and rather than just at local airports in India, and that would be, that would be catastrophic for IndiGo's reputation and in general. So I think this was definitely, the numbers played a difference in terms of how the analysis went. But I think the numbers for Norse also was a significant issue in terms that IndiGo did not want to be left holding the odd man out when the musical chairs music stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think IndiGo can afford a repeat in some way of what happened in December as far as their reputation is concerned. And who knows, maybe Willie Walsh said that in Rahul Bhatia's ear, not to risk it. Sean, I'm going to go back to Tewolde. He had a decade plus runway at Ethiopian, right? Because there was only one shareholder, the Ethiopian government. Probably no quarterly pressure, maybe not as much as he would probably have here in Air India. Air India is comparatively inside a private conglomerate, and there's still, of course, some damage from last year's crash. Does he actually get anything close to that runway at Tata, or it'll be a lot shorter than the one he had at Addis?
I think the pressures on Ethiopian Airlines, especially given the geopolitical environment and the politics in Ethiopia, I mean, effectively, the country was in civil war for a big chunk of the time that he was CEO over there, and he continued to manage it profitably. He was faced with the COVID pandemic where he was able to, to make these pivots. So when you look in terms of his track record in making quick decisions, receiving quick results, I think that has been very, very positive. And I no doubt that that is something which the Air India board has considered when making this choice, because if they want to get a quick and dirty tabletop analysis of what can be done to at least stem the bleeding at Air India in the short term before we start looking at redeveloping a longer term strategy, I think, there is no better person, or at least no person with a better track record than Tewolde has displayed in that respect. And he is an extremely good human resource person. There are very few people I know who have anything poor to say about Tewolde. And I mean, I've sat across the table from Tewolde as his opponent in negotiations and very rarely gotten anything I wanted out of it, and still left the room the best of friends and shaking hands and laughing and everything else. And I think that's a rare skill he has. And I think it's a skill which would be very useful for him in an Indian climate where relationships are just as important as the numbers in dealing with government and dealing with business, and especially in something like the Tatas, who pride themselves on being a family rather than just a business.
In Indian context, Tewolde might be categorized as a meaty churi, somebody who would really cut you deep and you wouldn't even notice. Interesting. Ameya, back to you. Air India announced over the past few days that they'll be aggressively expanding across North America. They are restoring, they are doubling Toronto non-stops. They are upgrading cabins, of course. They've cut out the Vienna tech stop, which is a big relief for its customers and its passengers. Now, IndiGo is out of the long haul game for the next 12, 18 months easily. Does Air India lock up diaspora loyalty during this period and especially corporate contracts, right? And it's not easy to win them back later.
Contracts are largely driven by the quality of service and the cost, a combination of that, especially for senior leadership where there are long-term contracts and in front cabins, it's got to do with the product and service. And Air India has a lot to work on, especially on the product part, with legacy planes, untimely swaps, and so many things happening. So the operations need to be in control completely. The other part is, of course, when it comes to loyalty, a large section of traffic between North America and India is loyal to low fares. They are not loyal to any airline. And they're loyal to low fares because you see the typical Indian who is going to travel once or twice a year with family is, because of the visa rules, many a times a single earner is saving more to make that trip home to India and is not bothered on which carrier the person is coming on, more bothered about saving that cost. Because these trips typically happen over a seasonal nature around Christmas, and also it's not a year-round traffic when it comes to diaspora. It's still a very seasonal traffic in nature. Air India's announcement to Toronto actually factor that in. They are doing a winter seasonal to Toronto from Mumbai with the 777. And that's more because you have a lot of diaspora which spends the relatively harsh Canadian winter in relatively easier Indian winter. And the harsh Indian summer is spent in Canadian summer climes. So that's how the traffic flows actually, and that's what makes it winter seasonal, capturing the specific traffic which is there. So yes, opportunistic, very nice. Long term, well, it all depends on how the service quality moves up, and a lot of that is related to product. So you see a lot of people complaining that we knew it's an ex-Etihad aircraft, or we knew it's an new refurbished plane, and then we got an old one. So you see a lot of people beyond AvGeeks are also now knowing the difference between these two. So 4 years of Air India transformation, you see more common people talk about that what was sold versus what has appeared in front of me at the airport is different.
No, absolutely. And you know what? This is something where I think Air India has made the mistake of over-promising and under-delivering. Air India has gone ahead and made this huge tamasha about we've got new planes, we've got a new product and everything. But then when you get on board a plane, especially on long haul, and remember, the long haul passengers are the ones who really tend to get upset the most because they've spent the most. And you wind up getting something out of 20 years ago. I don't think people would have minded that if you were paying lower prices and getting a below market average product. People appreciate that you get what you pay for. But the fact is that Air India is trying to price themselves higher. They're trying to draw a premium. They're definitely advertising themselves as a premium carrier, but they're delivering the same stuff they were doing when they were a sarkari, entity. And that is bait and switch, and people just, especially the Indian consumer, who just simply don't appreciate that kind of wool being pulled across their eyes.
Gentlemen, last question for this evening to both of you. We have two airlines in front of us, Air India and IndiGo. We have two opposite long-haul strategies. Air India, of course, like we've been discussing, doubling down now with owned wide bodies. IndiGo pausing to reset and re-enter later on with its own metal. 5 years out, which strategy do you think wins? And what has to go wrong for the other side to be proven right? Sean, if we could start with you.
I think both sides are perfectly poised to win. The Indian market is not one where there's going to be just one winner and everyone else is losers. I think we'll probably wind up seeing multiple winners: IndiGo, Air India, and probably a third player, whether that's Akasa or another entrant who comes into it. I think there is a niche. And I think actually, as IndiGo positions themselves into more of a hybrid carrier, I think that niche which IndiGo once had of being the low-cost carrier in India is somewhere where the growth at the lower end of the market is going to have to be picked up by somebody. And, Akasa definitely has the ambition to get there. I think it's still early days whether they have the product discipline and all the other things that made IndiGo successful, whether Akasa can duplicate it. They definitely have some very good people over there who know how to do it. So I think it'll be interesting days, but I don't think it's an IndiGo versus Air India. I think for the most part, IndiGo and Air India's bigger challenges are not each other, but rather the problems within. They need to sort their problems within and focus themselves within, because the Indian market will grow fast enough and will grow large enough for multiple winners to emerge.
Can I have the same thoughts that it's for both to win and none to lose when it comes to this? The competition is actually with the outside world. So IndiGo looking to convert a lot of destinations where people fly one stop currently to non-stops from a passenger perspective, and Air India growing the passenger traffic as well as equally snatching it from others by means of better product in terms of both hard and soft products. There is a sizable market, right? About 50% plus market, which is being taken by foreign carriers. 30% of this is to places in Europe and North America, which will be eventually served by IndiGo, which are being served by Air India, and which will continue to be expanded by Air India. I think for Air India, the game now is to actually convert all their thrice a week, four times a week services to daily from Delhi. When that happens, and then start building the Mumbai hub with thrice a week or four times a week service, depending on where the traffic is coming from, and ensure that the whole south gets routed via Mumbai and the entire east and north via Delhi. Done that, they are set. And that makes IndiGo's life very difficult to enter these markets because they're very strong. IndiGo, on the other hand, would look at the low-hanging fruits first, slots at London Heathrow if available, look for high-volume games and the easy transit. IndiGo's long haul also comes at a time when Project Sunrise would be operational. So you have a lot of one-stop traffic which was doing Australia, somewhere UK, some of which was being carried by Air India. So that traffic would have another pipeline which goes non-stop. So you have multiple things happening till 2028, which makes it difficult. So yeah, I think ideally it's still time for Air India and India to grow, which includes IndiGo. So it's not a game for one, but it's a game for all.
Really interesting times ahead. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. And that's a wrap on our milestone 75th episode of the Indian AvGeek. Massive thanks to Sean and Ameya for jumping on at a moment's notice to break down what might be the most consequential week in Indian aviation history. Quick reminder, Kareem Maklouf, the COO of Royal Jordanian Airlines, will be on the show this Monday morning. Watch out for a fantastic deep dive into Middle East aviation. If you've loved this emergency session, hit that follow button, drop us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, and pass this episode along to your favorite AvGeek. Feel free to follow me on social. You will find me everywhere, and you will find Ameya and Sean too. Always happy to have your feedback. With that, keep your tray tables up, your seatbelts fastened. I wish you well, and happy flying, my friends.